Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast, and I'm joined today by the Recruitments podcaster, Matt Alder. I spent ages trying to think of that intro, Matt.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We've even got the same microphone. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. We've got the glasses. You know, we're both kind of narcissistic enough to have our faces on our marketing material.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have the beard. I just can't grow one that's impressive enough.
I'm now not allowed to get rid of it because it's so ingrained into the marketing of the podcast. I couldn't get rid of it even if I wanted to now.
Fair enough.
But so it's great to have you back on. You were on about a year ago when we kind of first started this. So we're not going to necessarily kind of go over too much about kind of podcasting this time. I want to dip more into your recruitment tech brain, basically. But I just wanted to say, one, congratulations on reaching 300 episodes.
Thank you.
And passing 1 million downloads as well.
Yeah, that was a few months back. Yeah, it's great to kind of hit those milestones, and I'm very lucky that I have a very supportive and growing audience who help me to do 2 podcasts a week, basically. So yeah, it's fantastic, and I get a lot of support and help, which is amazing.
I was talking to your friend of mine, Stephen O'Donnell, the other day, and I said to him that you were going to be on the podcast, and I said to Stephen that if imitation is the greatest form of flattery, then I literally just ripped off your podcast basically. When I first started out, it was kind of like, right, do I want to be Adam Buxton? And I tried that, didn't work. I'm not very good at that kind of thing. And it says, okay, who else is really good at this? Okay, let's listen to all of yours. And it was like, yeah, I'll have a go at that. I'm nowhere near, obviously, but that there's a goal there,
Well, that's lovely to hear. That's lovely to hear.
But we're not on here to talk about podcasts today. We're actually going to talk about something a little bit more kind of serious, I think, probably. Obviously, on your podcast, it's the Recruiting Future podcast with Matt Alder. If no one's listened to it, go and check it out. But there's a lot around the future of recruitment and the future of recruitment tech. And I thought today we could kind of have a little chat around that and just kind of pick your brain on what you've learned from the 300 episodes and from all the kinds of people that you've spoken about. So let's pick off recruitment tech first. Okay, let's see where we can go with that. And where do you see it's changed over the last? So how long have you been doing the podcast? How many years now? 5 years?
I've been doing the podcast for 5 years.
So from when you started to now, you must have seen quite a change in recruitment tech at that point. What has been those changes that you've seen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. One of the things that I would have said before this year is the rate of change in terms of the technology that's being developed has been super fast. New things have come on to the market all of the time. Loads of startups, lots of VC money going into HR tech and recruiting tech in particular. But adoption's been very, very uneven. So I tend to talk to practitioners, heads of talent acquisition on the podcast, and it's a real kind of uneven split in terms of what technology people are using, the reasons why they're buying it, being stuck with legacy systems and all that kind of stuff. So there was this kind of big disconnect between the technology that was available and what employers were actually using. This year has been unprecedented for many, many reasons. But I think we're starting to see a leveling out now. We've seen a great big leap forward for recruiting tech because all employers are being forced to use technology to a greater extent than they were back in January and February. Now, some organizations were already set up to do that, already had video interviewing software in there, great strategies, great processes. Other people have had to sort of build that on the fly. And it's very, very clear that we're not going back to where we were in January in terms of where technology was fitting into the recruiting process. And I think we're at a very interesting time now because I think that there are a lot of employers and a lot of employers that I speak to who are now reviewing their technology to see what they have, to see if what they have is fit for purpose for the way their recruiting strategies are kind of shaping up for 2021 into 2022. So I think we have had, I've called this sort of elsewhere, sort of forced digital acceleration, forced accelerated digital transformation. Let's use as many words as possible. But it's been it has been a big leap forward in terms of recruiting technology. And I think the future is still uncertain, but it's very clear that adoption has massively accelerated. And I think that takes us to a place next year that we probably wouldn't have anticipated being in.
And is there any specific kind of tech in there that you would kind of pick out? I mean, you mentioned video, but there must be kind of more beyond that. Because I mean, video is kind of the obvious one that everyone's kind of using, but there must be other bits, other things in there that you've kind of spotted as well.
Yeah, I think the real growth area this year, and I'm going to caveat that a bit in a minute in terms of what I mean by that, has been automation. So any software that drives process automation or communication automation has done really well this year because people have been adopting that automation to deal with the fact that they're having to still recruit with smaller teams, or they've got more volume coming through. So I think that recruiting automation has taken a really big step forward this year. Mm-hmm. I caveat that because we were talking about automation last year, and I was reading some ridiculous articles that claimed, 50% of the recruiting process is already automated. Yesterday someone was claiming that 70% of CVs were read by robots first, and we know that that is all nonsense. Mm-hmm. So recruiting automation is coming in. There is some absolutely fantastic technologies that do some amazing things, but adoption is still at a very, very early stage. So that is really what I've got my eye on for the next, for the next 2 years, really. How is technology going to automate various parts of the recruitment process, recruitment marketing, communication, and, the recruitment process itself? And I think that we are only at the beginning of what that kind of revolution is going to look like. And I think before we've always been very cautious about using the word revolution because, as we know, things take a very, very long time to change, or used to take a very, very long time to change in talent acquisition. So we normally talk about evolution, but I think this is revolution. I think everything has changed, and I'm really, really interested to see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point about the automation piece because I think people kind of get it the wrong way around, like the people you were quoting. I think it's possible to automate 70% of the process. There is no one who's actually done 70% of the process. I think most people have kind of picked off chunks as and when they need, or when they've been cleverly sold to, or they've been forced down this kind of road as they are at the minute to say, right, this part of the process we can automate, that bit of the process we can automate. But I don't think anyone that I've come across as yet has kind of got over 20% of the process kind of automated at this moment. I think that's difficult to see. I think probably because so much of it's quite disparate at the minute. We still live in this kind of age where that bit over there doesn't really plug into that bit over there and this bit over here, and you can't really get all the kind of the jigsaw to kind of to fit together. So that's kind of my experience. But again, I agree. We definitely see more automation kind of coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's to automate something, you have to have the right kind of process in place to do that, and you have to have the right technology in place to do that, and all that kind of stuff. And I think I think that's where we are at the moment. There are some great tools out there, but even those tools just scratch the surface of what's possible. So what I do on my podcast is I just take these topics and try and dive into them from every possible angle that I can. So I've spoken to employers who are doing various aspects of recruiting automation. I've spoken to suppliers who are building some pretty impressive products and trying to drive the adoption. But I also, I kind of went into I went down a rabbit hole with it, and I had a consultant come on and talk about the nuts and bolts of robotic process automation and how it works, and the theories and technologies that sit behind all of this. And it's just really clear that actually, to a certain extent, recruiting is playing catch up. And I think a lot of that is because it is such it's a discipline that relies so much on people talking and communicating with other people.
Yeah.
It's not like accounting, where automation, is probably much more advanced. It's that kind of human aspect, and understanding how automation works in that context is really where I think we are right now.
I always kind of also get the feeling that there's a disconnect between the providers of marketing automation, or automation in general, let's say, and the people that want to use it. And there's a misunderstanding of what automation actually means. There's the tech providers are very clear on their definition of automation, but I think there's a misunderstanding in the buyers of what automation actually is. And sometimes I think there's some mis-selling of something that's meant to be automated, and it's not actually automated. It's probably just sequential or something like that.
Yeah, and we're doing it right now by talking about recruiting automation as if it's actually a singular thing that you can buy or you can do. And it's a really complex situation. You've got lots of different aspects of marketing, lots of aspects of communication, lots of aspects of process, and automation looks different in all of those cases, as you say. Different types of automation. Is this intelligent automation, if that actually exists, or is it just kind of repeatable steps? What is it? And that's why I find it such an interesting, I think it's a really interesting topic, and I don't think it's one that we have explored as an industry or as commentators on the industry in enough detail. I think it just comes down to this: it's recruitment automation. We're going to buy it, and then you get into, for years, there's been this what I call this pantomime argument about, it's expressed as something like, can you replace a recruiter with an algorithm, which in itself is a meaningless sentence, meaningless question. But then it would just trigger this non-debate, this kind of pantomime response of, oh no, you can't, oh yes you can, with no nuance, no exploration of what it actually means, and some very entrenched positions on something that isn't actually a question. So I think it's great to move past that and actually dive into some of the nuance and some of the depth around this, and look what's possible. And as I say, the circumstances that many companies find themselves in mean that, in some respects, this is something they have to look at and something they have to do.
Are there any particular kind of bits of automation or automation tools that you kind of been being impressed by, or, can you name check anyone?
Yeah, there's a few. It's kind of difficult because, again, we're trying to force a category on something that isn't a category. You've got tools, companies like Paradox and Zor and Eightfold and various others, who kind of get put into that kind of AI automation bucket, but they actually do sort of different things. In recruitment marketing automation has been around for, as we know, has been around for ages, and recruiting's been adopting that, to a greater lesser extent in various aspects of recruitment marketing. So I think there are some great tools out there that deal with some very specific aspects of what of automating recruiting. I think what was interesting for me was to really get into the robotic process automation, the stuff that sits behind all of this, and understand the providers and the technology that actually a lot of these systems are being built on. One other company came to mind, actually, Smart Dreamers, who do recruitment marketing automation, who I think have got some interesting technology. But there are lots of them out there, and I don't want to offend anyone by missing them out, because they're not at the top of my head right now.
Other automation providers are available out there, basically.
Absolutely, and are fantastic in their own right. And please don't phone me up and have a go at me for not mentioning you.
It's all right. No one listens to podcasts anyway, so we'll be fine.
I'd heard that.
That must have been from me, because it would have been a listener. So on the flip side, is what are the things that you found that possibly we should avoid then? Because obviously we've talked about automation and possibly the kind of automation revolution, and that it's something that everyone really should be looking at, but in a slightly more kind of nuanced and subtle way. And not that it's not use it as a kind of a blanket to cover all of recruitment, but is there things that have become either overhyped or that are just kind of not ready for market yet, or anything else that maybe is just kind of we should just be a little wary of right now?
Yeah, I think most recruiting technology has been overhyped at some stage or other. I think that I think one of the issues in our industry is a lot of the narrative on social and on podcasts and in all of the noise. I was going to say at events, but we don't have face-to-face events anymore, but online events. A lot of that narrative is being driven by vendors and suppliers who are, coming up with great solutions to problems that may or may not actually exist. And I think that can sometimes take us down these fantasy rabbit holes of, things that could be done, but actually no one. It's not enough. It's not a big enough problem for someone to actually invest time in doing. So, I think there were two. Rather than sort of pick on a specific technology, I suppose there's two bits to this that I would say. First of all, I think that a lot of people buy technology because they think it sounds great, because they think it's going to solve a particular problem for them, or they feel like they're missing out. They feel that everyone's talking about X provider, and actually we should give them a trial because that's where all the cool kids are, that's going to make my career if I buy this software for my company, and that's really irrelevant. It's all about having the right strategy for technology in terms of supporting the direction that you're going in your business, and I just see that not happening as much as it should. So I think that's the first thing. It's like understand the strategy that you have and what you're trying to do, and then go and look for technology that supports that strategy or moves that strategy forward. And then I think very specifically around marketing automation in recruitment marketing, there are some brilliant tools out there. You can automate entire funnels of this, that and the other, and that's amazing. But if you don't have the right content or the right thinking behind it or the right understanding of your target audience, what we tend to see, and I think we do this a lot in recruitment, is just spamming on steroids.
Oh yeah.
I'm just gonna buy this amazing bit of kit and I'm just going to plug a load of job ads into it and just send them to everybody everywhere forever. So I think it's, and again, that's down to marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that has to come before technology. And I think sometimes because of the way that the narrative in our industry works, everything kind of happens backwards.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna follow up on the marketing automation. Even though being a marketeer and running a digital marketing agency, those kind of pieces of kind of spammy marketing automation, where when you get an email from someone on LinkedIn or you get a response to a LinkedIn connection, it's kind of automated, and it feels it's doing exactly the opposite of what you're trying to do, and just alienating people instead of kind of being more transparent and bringing them into it.
Absolutely, and sometimes with all the channels that we've got, the obvious stuff isn't always, it's not always the obvious stuff that works. So just using my own experience of marketing my podcast now, like you, I'm chopping up content and building Instagram up as a channel and putting stuff in LinkedIn and sending out emails to my email list and worrying every week that I spend too long editing and not enough time promoting. But actually, I mean, podcasting is actually got me talking about. I've managed to swing this back to podcasting.
It's fine.
Podcasting is interesting because it is all about people subscribing. But what's been interesting to me is the most powerful posts that have appeared on social media that have driven traffic to my podcast have been from other people, and very often other people I don't even know. So there's been 3 or 4 occasions in the last few months where someone I don't know, in some cases someone I'm not even connected to, has written a really long post or a blog post, or kind of drawn everyone's attention to an interview that I've published, and that's brought me the most engagement in terms of people. In terms of people checking out the podcast. And what that says to me is actually the content is far more important than the promotion was, because that's the content speaking for itself and actually, motivating someone to promote it to an audience that I would probably not have reached if they hadn't done that. And I'm very grateful to those people who've done that. And if anyone else wants to do that, I'll be very grateful to them as well.
But that's the kind of content is king kind of philosophy, isn't it? If good content and relevant content aimed at the right people it should, in inverted commas, should always do better than just kind of spamming people. And I completely agree. I mean, we obviously, this podcast isn't on the same level as yours, but definitely that kind of advocacy from other people is when it kind of really switches on. And we're very keen on our guests that kind of do a lot of the actual promotion themselves once we go, and that's where a lot of this is kind of driven from, not necessarily from the stuff that we're doing kind of our own promotion, but actually from the guests themselves.
And it's, that really holds true for jobs as well. That kind of advocacy, can't say it, about a company, but also making it easy for people to do that's just very powerful recruitment marketing.
Yeah, I know that kind of advocacy piece is very popular at the minute, and that's a word that kind of keeps popping up. It seems to be trending, is that kind of employer advocacy piece. It seems to almost taken over from personal branding, and now kind of employer advocacy is the new hot topic in kind of with recruitment consultants and with marketeers and within recruitment.
Absolutely, I should probably learn how to say it properly.
It's all right. I've got to put my dentures in to get that one out, so it's all right. Yeah, so just kind of coming back to some of the stuff we kind of mentioned about the things to almost kind of avoid, and the recruitment kind of marketing and the marketing automation. You're picking up on your piece. You're right. There's always needs to be this strategy that sits behind it, but that's the same with anything that you're kind of always going to kind of roll out. And with most pieces of automation, there still needs to be someone in the background monitoring all this, checking all this, and there needs to be this human touch all the way along the process, which kind of brings me on to thinking about, well, this whole kind of argument around whether you can kind of replace a recruitment consultant with an algorithm. Well, the job just changes, doesn't it? At that point, it just adapts to be something slightly different. You're still you're the recruitment overseer or whatever that would be, basically, at that point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's interesting from the conversations I've been having with employers about automation is where it works best. Because there are lots of horror stories about, rogue algorithms discriminating against people and all this kind of stuff. And also we're not quite sure how many of those are actually true stories or just, they just make for good, clickbait newspaper content. But I think where I've seen automation working really well is where it delivers great outcomes for everybody, where it makes recruiting better for everybody. So it's making it better for candidates because they're getting a better level of communication. They're able to do interviews in a more flexible timescale. They're getting, they're getting feedback, based on what they're doing. It's working for recruiters because it's making them. It's removing repeatable tasks and giving them the opportunity to focus on the human aspects of their job. It's creating more value for line managers because hiring managers, because they're getting better quality candidates through and they have not got the same demands on their time in terms of recruiting. And I think it's that's where it really works, where you're getting great outcomes for everyone. And I think if that's out of balance, then that's where it becomes unhelpful and doesn't drive the industry forward. So if the candidates feel that they're literally being screened by a robot or a computer that says no, or they don't have any, they're being judged on a very, very small aspect of what they do or what they've done. That's an issue. I think it's all about getting better outcomes for everyone, and I think that's where it's really valuable.
I completely agree, and it kind of brings me to my kind of feelings about recruitment consultants, and that this really should allow recruitment consultants to be more consultative, and kind of step away from the traditional kind of sales role. And I've never really thought that recruitment consultants should be salespeople in the first place. I don't think that they're not really sitting that pot. And I know there's a kind of several kind of arguments online I've read recently about people. Well, recruitment is sales, and I don't generally believe that. I believe it's recruiters are much, are beyond a salesperson. They're not trying to necessarily sell you anything. It's much more of a consultative role. And I think the technology aspect is an enabler towards kind of moving much more in that direction.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that we need to get to a position where recruiters are curious and excited about automation and really understanding it and looking into it, rather than going back to this kind of pantomime, oh no, it's not, you'll never replace me, this has no place in recruiting is all about humans, blah 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 blah. They're not helpful arguments. It's like everything is being automated in business at the moment, everything. And there's no, if you want to make a case for recruiting being special and not being automated, then you need to kind of really understand this, embrace it, and see where it can be used properly. Because my biggest fear is that talent acquisition and recruiters, the more that we resist this and don't understand it and say it's not for us, the more likely it is to be imposed by other aspects of a business, a CEO or a CFO or whatever, who says, let's just automate that because, I don't really understand the value of it. So I think it's really important that recruiters understand this, embrace it, look at the advantages, and work out where they fit in and how it makes them do their job better, and then make that case to the stakeholders that they work with. And I think that's critical, and it does take. It does take that role to some new and interesting places beyond how we've traditionally thought of it.
And actually, recruitment's primed for some kind of automation, because actually it's not the most complicated process in the world. Yes, it's got its nuances depending on what type of your role you're recruiting for, and where and which industry, etc. But it's a fairly almost linear process, and and there are definitely bits in that chunks that can just be picked off, which are completely useless, that a person should be doing them in the first place, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, if you disagree with that, I think you need to take a step back and look at how you live the rest of your life and how much of that is automated, and whether that's I don't know, banking or shopping or whatever that might be. It's it's the theme of our age, and I think it's really important that recruitment understands it and takes the lead in how it works in our industry, rather than sitting back and waiting for someone else to do it to us.
I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, because knowing recruiters and recruitment in general, we're generally pretty slow to pick up on new tech. And then when it does come along, it's usually kind of running scared from it. I'm old enough to remember when job boards popped up, and that was going to be the end of recruitment. Then LinkedIn came along, and that was going to be the end of recruitment. And actually, the way it's working now is that recruitment has easily outlived job boards, which are kind of on the slide, and people are kind of finding ways around them. And LinkedIn is turning into a social media platform or social networking platform. So it's kind of outlived that as well, almost, to a certain extent.
And I think that's the whole thing. I think the conversations around all of this just tend to be so simplistic. It's like, either something is going to come and kill recruiting, or recruiting is broken and it needs fixing. And these are massive, ridiculous generalizations that don't actually mean anything. So it's not really surprising that's happened, because we're talking about, for example, my wife asked me last year why there were so many recruiting conferences, and in her industry, there are like a few, 2 or 3 conferences a year, and she's like, there seems to be some kind of conference or event in recruiting every week, and there still is online
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and that's because it's such a big, complicated industry. There are millions of people working in it. Every single company interfaces with it, regardless of the industry they're in. Which, yes, it's a simple concept and a simple linear process, but it's very, very complicated in
Yeah, I
terms
mean,
of.
I oversimplified it, to be
Yeah,
honest.
no, but you didn't. You
Yeah.
didn't. I totally get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, when people make those stonking generalizations about this is going to kill recruitment consultants, or recruitment is broken and my technology is going to fix it, it's just nonsense, because it's applying a very simple solution to a very complex question. And if there's anything that 2020 teaches us, is that's not a good thing to do.
So we spent a lot of time talking around kind of automation as one of the
Yeah.
things that's gonna dominate the recruitment landscape within over the coming years. Is there anything else that you've kind of seen that's coming along that we should be aware of outside of kind of automation?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, lots of stuff, but in keeping with your show, let's talk about recruitment marketing.
Yeah.
I think programmatic advertising, targeting, I think this is the future. It's particularly the future now because for many companies, the last thing they need is a massive generic volume of applications. They're looking for very precise skills, and I think that embracing some of the brilliant ways of targeting people, and some of the sort of the programmatic approaches and technologies that are out there, the data that's available, all of these things, I think are are really, really, are really interesting and sort of really critical to the way we move forward. And I think that 2020 has shifted that along, because people, when their kind of advertising budgets come back for recruiting, they're going to look at things very, very differently after the kind of the break and the pause that we've had this year. And I think that's really interesting, and that is again something I've got my eye on for the next 2 years.
And I tell you what, I wanted to quickly, you've mentioned a couple of times that you're kind of obviously focusing on certain things that you're going to pick up on in the podcast, but also I know you are an author, and you have released several kind of white papers over the last kind of couple of years as well. And these are the kind of topics that you're going to be picking up in those as well.
Yeah, I also tend to write about broader things as well. So I've got a real interest in talent generically. What do we mean by talent? How do people recruit talent? How do people develop talent? So I've got a white paper coming out in a few weeks' time, which is all about it's kind of all about the technical acceleration in learning development and performance management and developing skills. I'm working on a second book with my good friend Mervyn Dinnan at the moment, which has been slightly delayed for a number of reasons, but particularly because of the pandemic this year. But we're hoping that's coming out early next year. And that's about, again, a broader look at talent in the post-COVID world and how all the technology works around it. So really, yeah, my focus is very much on recruiting automation, but also broader thinking about talent and how companies get skills into, how employers get the right skills into their business. Do they develop people? Do they hire people? Do they borrow those skills? How does contracting and gig economy, how does that develop? So it's always very technology driven at its heart, but it's kind of all of those. It's all of those things.
And what we'll do, we'll include some links in the show notes to where people can pick up the book. And if this kind of coincides with the white paper coming out, we'll also include a link to the white paper. Matt, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. You can sit there and baffle me with kind of recruitment tech for hours, but I'm not sure everyone else is going to kind of stick with me for that long. But yeah, again, so thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope to again speak to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.